The maid asked for one night with the millionaire. He didn't hesitate, and that night changed everything. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Today's story is titled, The Maid Asked for One Night with the Millionaire. He did not hesitate, and that night changed everything. Sounds mysterious, right? Let us get back to our main character. It was past midnight in Manhattan. The kitchen of the Warren penthouse was almost silent, except for the steady hum of the refrigerator and the faint clinking of glass. Grace Miller stood by the sink, sleeves rolled up, rinsing crystal wine glasses left over from a private dinner. The city lights shimmered through the tall windows behind her, reflections dancing across the marble counters. Her hands were tired, but her mind was louder than the silence around her. Rent was due in 2 days. Her mother's heart medication had run out yesterday, and in her worn wallet there was only $27. The door behind her opened softly. Caleb Warren walked in, barefoot, his white shirt half untucked, the image of a man too wealthy to look tired but too human to hide it. The faint glow from his smartwatch blinked with his pulse, a reminder of the heart surgery he had survived only months ago. He opened the cabinet, searching for his medication, but paused when he noticed her. Grace froze, instinctively straightening up. "Mr. Warren, I did not hear you come in." He gave a tired smile, polite but distant. "You are working late." "Yes, sir," she murmured. "I just wanted to finish the glassware before morning." For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them was heavy but strangely gentle. Then a phone buzzed on the counter his. The screen lit up with a message. "Confirming tomorrow night's Heart Foundation Gala. You'll need a partner for the red carpet, Caleb." Grace hesitated, her heart pounding. She had overheard the staff earlier. The gala was the biggest medical charity event of the year where top surgeons and donors gathered to raise money for cardiac research. She also knew her mother's name was on the hospital's waiting list for that very same program. Something inside her snapped between fear and desperation. She took a shaky breath, turned to face him fully, and said, "Mr. Warren, may I ask you something?" Caleb lifted his eyes, surprised by the tremor in her voice. "Go ahead." She gripped the edge of the counter to steady herself. "I know this will sound crazy, but please, give me one night. Just one night to go with you to that gala. Not for money, not for fame, just one chance to be there, to talk to someone who might help my mother." The silence stretched. Grace felt her face burn. What was she even saying? A maid asking for one night with a millionaire? It sounded ridiculous even to her. She took a step back. "I am sorry. Forget I said anything." But Caleb did not let her finish. He studied her quietly, his expression unreadable. Then, to her shock, he said in a calm, steady tone, "All right, one night." Her breath caught. You mean it?" He nodded once. "Tomorrow at 7. You will go with me." She stood frozen, unsure whether to cry or laugh. His words were simple, almost effortless, yet they carried the weight of something that could change everything. As Caleb turned to leave, he added softly, "Make sure you have a dress. The gala is formal." Grace whispered, "Yes, sir." The moment the door closed, she sank against the counter, her pulse racing. The city below blinked like 1,000 watchful eyes, and for the first time in a long time, hope wild, dangerous hope flared inside her chest. But she did not know yet that his yeses was not an act of kindness alone. It was the beginning of a night that neither of them would ever forget. The next morning, sunlight crept through the thin curtains of a small apartment in Queens. The walls were lined with faded photos and stacks of unpaid hospital bills. Grace Miller sat on the edge of her bed, tying her worn sneakers, staring at the floor as the old oxygen machine beside her mother hummed softly. "Did you even sleep?" her mother asked, her voice weak but warm. Mrs. Miller had been a nurse for 25 years before her heart condition forced her to stop working. Even now, her instincts never faded. "You look pale, honey. What happened last night?" Grace hesitated. How could she explain that she had asked her millionaire boss for one night? That she had dared to step out of her world and into his? "I just talked to Mr. Warren," she finally said, "about the charity gala. He agreed to take me with him." Her mother's eyes widened. "Grace, what do you mean? You are his maid, not his date." I know, Mom, Grace whispered, brushing a tear away. It is not like that. I just need one chance to talk to someone, maybe a doctor from Street Mary's. They are connected to his foundation. If I can tell them about your case, maybe they can help. Mrs. Miller sighed, clutching her blanket. I raised you to work hard, not to beg rich people for mercy. Grace smiled faintly. Then let us call it fighting, not begging. Her mother looked away, torn between pride and fear. Just be careful, sweetheart. People like him, they live in a different world. Do not let them make you feel small. Grace kissed her mother's forehead before leaving for her day shift. The elevator of the hotel reflected her pale face and messy hair. She looked like a ghost among the polished guests checking in with designer luggage. When she arrived at the staff locker room, whispers already followed her. One of the maids, Carla, smirked. So, I heard Mr. Warren talk to you last night. What did he want? Another midnight cleaning? Grace ignored her, forcing a polite smile. It was just work, but her heart thudded in her chest. She replayed his voice again and again. Tomorrow at 7, you will go with me. The way he had said it, calm, firm, no hesitation, felt like something she had only dreamed. At lunch break, she slipped into a corner booth of the employee cafeteria and opened her phone. The news feed was already filled with previews of the Heart Foundation Gala. Photos of celebrities, surgeons, and politicians flooded the screen. Beneath one headline she read, Caleb Warren, to attend charity gala, with special guest, identity undisclosed. Her stomach flipped. She was the undisclosed guest. That afternoon she was summoned to the top floor. The elevator ride felt endless. When the doors opened, Caleb's assistant was waiting. Mr. Warren would like to see you. Grace followed her into the penthouse. Caleb stood by the window, wearing a tailored navy suit. His smartwatch flashed again, showing his pulse rate. I had my lawyer prepare this, he said, turning toward her with a calm, almost businesslike tone. He handed her a folder. It is a short agreement, one night only. You will attend the gala as my companion. You will not have to say anything personal. You will simply be there beside me. Grace took the folder, her fingers trembling slightly. The paper was crisp, the ink still fresh. She read through each line carefully. It was clear, professional, almost cold until she reached the last clause. Any compensation provided shall be directed to Street Mary's cardiac unit in the name of Mrs. Miller. She looked up, stunned. You added my mother's name? Caleb nodded. You said that is why you wanted to go. I prefer my help to be transparent. She blinked back tears. Mr. Warren, I cannot accept charity. It is not charity, he replied softly. It is a partnership. You will help me appear human for one night. I will help your mother get a fair chance. We both win. For the first time, Grace allowed herself to meet his eyes fully. There was something tired but honest in them, something that did not fit the image of a ruthless millionaire. I do not have a gown, she murmured. He handed her a small black card. Go to Madison Atelier. Tell them my name. They will help you. 7 o'clock sharp tomorrow. Grace held the card like it was a fragile dream. Thank you, she said quietly. As she turned to leave, Caleb's voice stopped her. Grace? She turned back. Do not let anyone tell you that you do not belong in that room, he said. You earned this night. The words followed her all the way down the elevator, echoing louder than the hum of the city below. Outside, the November air was cold, biting against her skin. But for the first time in months, Grace felt warmth rising in her chest. She had 24 hours to transform from an invisible maid into a woman who could stand beside a millionaire if only for one night. And deep down, she knew this night would decide far more than her mother's surgery. It might decide who she truly was meant to be. The next day moved like a dream Grace could barely keep up with. At noon, she stood outside Madison Atelier, the kind of boutique she had only seen from bus windows. The glass doors reflected her plain uniform and tired face. Inside, soft piano music floated through the air, and rows of gowns shimmered under golden lights. A woman in black approached with a professional smile. You must be Miss Miller, Mr. Warren called ahead. This way, please. Grace followed her, feeling as though she had stepped into another world. Fabrics brushed her fingers like water. She tried not to stare at the price tag some higher than her yearly salary. After several fittings, the woman returned with a dress that seemed made for her. Midnight blue silk that caught light like ripples on a lake, elegant but not loud. When she stepped out of the fitting room, even the tailor paused. Grace stared at herself in the mirror. She barely recognized the woman staring back. Still, a thought whispered, It is just one night. That evening, back at the penthouse, a lawyer sat waiting at the dining table. The skyline behind him glowed orange and violet. Caleb stood by the window, his jacket perfectly fitted, his expression unreadable. "Miss Miller," the lawyer said, sliding a folder toward her. "This is the formal agreement. It states that you will attend tonight's gala as Mr. Warren's guest for image representation only. No payment, no continuation beyond midnight. Do you agree to these terms?" Grace nodded, but her eyes moved to the line at the bottom of the page, the one about Street Mary's cardiac unit. Her mother's name was printed neatly in black ink. It felt more real than anything she had seen in her life. She signed slowly, her hand trembling. "Yes, I agree." The lawyer collected the papers, nodded to Caleb, and left quietly. For a moment, only the low hum of city traffic filled the silence. Caleb turned toward her, holding a small velvet box. "I have one last detail." When he opened it, a delicate silver bracelet glimmered inside, engraved with a single word, "Heart." "It is not jewelry for show," he said calmly. "It is symbolic. Tonight's event is about heart health after all, and it fits the story we will tell." Grace took the bracelet, her breath catching. "The story?" He gave a faint smile. "If someone asks, say we met after my surgery, that you were part of my recovery program. Keep it simple. People love simple stories." Her lips parted in surprise. "That sounds like lying." "It is protecting privacy," he replied. "That is what this contract is, a polite lie for a good cause." Grace hesitated, then slid the bracelet onto her wrist. It fit perfectly, as though it had been waiting for her. A soft knock broke the tension. Caleb's assistant entered, holding a small velvet case. "Mr. Warren, your cufflinks." She handed them over, then smiled politely at Grace before leaving. When the door closed, Caleb looked at Grace again. His gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. "A little," she admitted. "I have never been anywhere near people like that." He straightened his tie, his tone gentle. "Just remember this. They are people, not gods. And tonight, you will walk beside me as an equal. Understand?" Grace nodded, though her heart was pounding so loud she could barely breathe. As they walked toward the private elevator, she noticed the faint scar peeking above his collar, the mark from his heart surgery. Without thinking, she asked, "Does it still hurt?" He paused for a moment. "Some nights. But pain reminds me I am alive." She looked down, whispering, "My mother says the same thing." The elevator doors closed with a soft chime. For a moment, they stood side by side in silence, the city lights reflecting off the metal walls. Downstairs, a sleek black car waited by the entrance. Caleb gestured for her to enter first. As she settled into the leather seat, she caught her reflection in the window, her dress, her hair, the bracelet glinting under the city glow. When Caleb sat beside her, he adjusted his smartwatch, the heart monitor blinking steadily. "Grace," he said quietly, "you have done more for me than you know. When I woke up after surgery, the doctor said I needed to slow down. But it is hard to slow down when all you know is work. Preparing for this gala, talking to you, it feels different." Grace turned her head toward him, surprised by the hint of vulnerability in his voice. "Different how?" He looked out the window, eyes lost in the skyline. "Like maybe I am still human after all." The car merged into the evening traffic. Manhattan's skyscrapers stretched into the purple dusk, each window glowing like a pulse. Grace held her clutch tightly, her stomach knotted between fear and awe. This was really happening. The contract was signed. The dress fit like a second skin. And in less than an hour, she would step into a ballroom filled with millionaires, pretending to belong to one of them. But as she glanced sideways, watching Caleb adjust his cufflinks with quiet composure, she realized something she could not explain. Beneath his controlled, perfect exterior, there was a man fighting something far more human than power or pride, loneliness. And somewhere deep inside her, a small voice whispered, "Maybe that is what he saw in me too." Neither of them spoke again for the rest of the ride. The city kept breathing outside the tinted windows, unaware that two strangers bound by a single night and a fragile promise were about to walk into a story that would change both their hearts forever. The car stopped in front of the Grand Marlowe Hotel, where the Heart Foundation Gala was already in full glow. Golden lights poured through the glass entrance, and camera flashes sparkled like fireworks. Grace felt her throat tighten as the driver opened the door. Caleb stepped out first, tall and poised, the picture of control. When he turned and offered his hand, for a second Grace hesitated. His palm was warm, steady, grounding. She took it, her legs trembling slightly as she stepped onto the red carpet. The world exploded in sound. Shutters clicked, voices called his name, and somewhere a reporter shouted, "Mr. Warren, who is the lady with you?" Caleb leaned closer, whispering just enough for her to hear. "Smile. They feed on confidence." Grace forced a smile, her heart pounding against her ribs. The cameras followed every step as they entered the lobby, where a chandelier sparkled like 1,000 small suns. She had never seen anything like it. Everywhere she looked were polished shoes, glittering gowns, and people laughing with the ease of those who never had to count rent money. Inside the ballroom, the scent of roses and champagne filled the air. A string quartet played near the grand staircase. Caleb guided her to their table, pulling out her chair before sitting beside her. His gestures were precise, effortless, but every so often his eyes darted to her as if checking she was still breathing. A waiter poured wine. Grace held her glass carefully, afraid to leave fingerprints. Caleb leaned slightly toward her. "Relax," he said softly. "You are doing fine." She tried to smile, but when she looked up, she caught a few women across the room whispering and pointing. She lowered her gaze, cheeks burning. "They are talking about me," she murmured. "They always do," Caleb replied without looking. "It means you are visible. Take it as a compliment." The lights dimmed slightly as the host took the stage. Grace clutched her small clutch purse tighter, reminding herself why she was here. Somewhere in this room were doctors from Street, Mary's the people who might decide her mother's chance at surgery. After the opening speech, dinner was served. Conversation swirled around her about mergers, politics, and private jets. Grace nodded politely when spoken to, trying to keep up. At one point, a balding man with a sharp smile leaned toward Caleb. "So Caleb," the man said, glancing at Grace, "this must be the famous fiancé we have been hearing whispers about. Beautiful choice. Surprised you finally settled down." Caleb's expression did not change. "We are here for the foundation, not gossip, Alan." But before he could steer the conversation away, Grace found her voice. "Actually, we are both here for the same reason. Heart health is something very close to both of us." The man chuckled. "Indeed? You work in the medical field, Mrs.?" Grace swallowed. She could lie. Or she could tell the truth, partly. "My mother was a nurse for 25 years. She is waiting for a heart surgery right now. So yes, this cause means a lot to me." The table went quiet. Even the man blinked, caught off guard. Then Caleb spoke, calm and steady. "That is exactly why we are supporting the new cardiac unit at St. Mary's. People like her mother deserve more than waiting lists." He reached under the table and gave her hand a light squeeze, as if saying, "You handled that perfectly." The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. She laughed when he did, listened when others spoke, and started to believe she might belong here at least for this one night. When the speeches ended, music filled the room again. Couples drifted to the dance floor. Caleb turned to her, offering his hand once more. "Would you dance?" Grace hesitated. "I am not very good at." "Neither am I," he said with a small smile. "Doctors told me to avoid stress. Dancing is supposed to help." She laughed nervously but took his hand. The music was slow, tender, the kind that melted time. His arm settled gently around her waist, her other hand resting against his shoulder. She could feel his heartbeat under her fingers, steady but real. "You see?" he murmured. "Perfectly fine." For a fleeting moment, she forgot the contract, the cameras, the money, everything. It was just two people moving through light and sound, breathing the same rhythm. When the song ended, applause broke out for the next donor announcement. Caleb guided her outside for a breath of air. The balcony overlooked the city skyline, silver and gold, stretching endlessly. "You handled yourself well in there," he said, looking at her with quiet pride. Grace smiled faintly. "I almost spilled my drink on that investor. That would have ruined your perfect image." He laughed softly. "You underestimate how much I needed something imperfect tonight." They stood in silence, the wind lifting her hair. From this height, the streets looked like thin lines of light, the noise of the world distant and harmless. She turned to him. "Why did you really say yes to me that night, Mr. Warren?" He exhaled slowly, eyes still on the city below. "Because you were the first person in months who talked to me like a man, not a business card." The honesty in his tone made her chest tighten. She wanted to say something, but her voice caught. Then, a flash of light startled them. Down below on the street, a photographer had pointed his camera upward, capturing the moment. Caleb leaning close, adjusting the bracelet on her wrist. He did not notice, but Grace did. and she had no idea that one picture, taken in that fragile sliver of peace, would soon become the spark that set their lives on fire. The night after the gala felt like a blur of lights and applause. Grace could still hear the echo of the music in her ears, could still see the way Caleb had smiled at her under the chandelier. But as the car drove them back to the penthouse, that warm glow began to fade. Reality was waiting. Inside the car, silence hung between them. Grace held her small clutch tightly on her lap, staring at the city passing outside. She wanted to ask if she had done well, if he was pleased. But Caleb's expression was unreadable, calm and distant, as if the gala had taken more out of him than he wanted to admit. When they reached the penthouse, he loosened his tie and leaned against the counter, exhausted. Grace started to thank him, but before she could speak, he winced, pressing his hand to his chest. "Mr. Warren?" she gasped, rushing to him. He shook his head. "It is nothing, just a little tightness." But his breathing quickened. Grace grabbed the glass of water nearby and guided him to sit. She remembered the emergency routine her mother had taught her: slow breathing, no panic, count every inhale. "Look at me," she said gently. "Breathe with me, in and out. That is it. You are okay. On by." He did as she said, eyes locked on hers, the tension in his face slowly easing. The monitor on his smartwatch began to blink a steady green again. When he could finally speak, his voice was quiet. "You really do know what you are doing." She smiled faintly, though her hands were still shaking. "I told you my mom used to be a nurse." He nodded, rubbing his temples. "You saved me a trip to the hospital tonight." Grace laughed softly. "You saved me from spilling champagne all over that investor, so I guess we are even." He looked up at her, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Maybe we make a good team." The air between them changed. Neither spoke for a moment. The city lights through the window painted silver on the marble floor. Grace felt her heart beat faster, not from fear but from something she could not name. "I should go," she finally whispered. "It is late." "Say." Caleb stood slowly, still holding his chest. "Stay, just until I am sure this episode passes. You can take the guest room." She hesitated, then nodded. "All right, one night." He smiled quietly at the words, the same ones that had started it all. One night. Hours later, the storm outside rolled through Manhattan. Rain hit the glass walls of the penthouse, thunder murmuring in the distance. Grace sat in the guest room, her dress folded neatly over a chair, her bracelet still on her wrist. She could not sleep. Her mind replayed every look, every word, every moment. From the hallway came the sound of footsteps. Caleb was awake, moving toward the kitchen. Grace peeked out and found him sitting on the floor, his back against the cabinet, head in his hands. The glow of the refrigerator light made him look fragile, so far from the powerful man the world saw. Without thinking, she walked over and sat beside him. No words, no hesitation, just quiet presence. "I could not sleep," he said softly. "The doctor told me anxiety is normal after surgery, but it feels heavier than that." Grace placed her hand over his, steady and warm. "It is because you have carried too much alone for too long." He glanced at her, eyes tired but softer now. "You talk like you know what that feels like." She smiled. "I do. It is the only thing I have ever known." For a long time they sat there listening to the rain. Caleb finally leaned his head back and exhaled. "Do you ever wonder what would happen if the people who work for me knew that the woman who cleaned their rooms is the only one who has seen me like this?" Grace's voice was gentle. "Maybe they would think you are more human than you let them believe." Something about her words broke through his walls. He turned toward her, eyes deep and searching. "Grace, She shook her head. "You do not have to say anything. It was just one night." "Lo, you call." He looked at her for a long moment, as if memorizing her face. Then quietly he said, "One night that changed more than you think." Outside, the rain softened to a drizzle. Grace finally closed her eyes, resting her head against the cabinet beside him. The city kept breathing, unaware that two people from different worlds were finding a strange peace in the same silence. Neither of them noticed the faint flash outside the window, another camera, another story waiting to break. And when morning came, that single photograph would change everything once again. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the penthouse windows, sharp and golden against the marble floor. Grace woke up in the guest room, disoriented for a moment. The storm had passed, leaving behind a calm silence that felt almost fragile. She could hear Caleb moving in the kitchen, the faint sound of dishes and the steady hum of the coffee machine. She took a breath, straightened her hair, and stepped out quietly. Caleb was already dressed in a gray shirt and slacks, his sleeves rolled up, looking far more rested than the night before. When he saw her, he smiled faintly. "Good morning. You survived the storm." She smiled back, awkward but genuine. "Barely. I thought the wind would take the whole building." He chuckled, then gestured toward the coffee pot. "Coffee or tea?" "Tea, please." He poured it for her himself, and for a few minutes they sat across the counter in comfortable silence. The bracelet on her wrist caught the light, the engraved word heart gleaming softly. Grace took a sip, then said carefully, "Thank you for trusting me last night." Caleb's expression turned thoughtful. "I should be the one thanking you. I am not sure what would have happened if you were not there." Before Grace could respond, his phone buzzed on the counter. The screen flashed with notifications, dozens of them. His face changed immediately. He picked it up, scrolled once, and went completely still. Grace felt a chill crawl up her spine. "What is it?" He turned the phone around. On the screen was a headline, already spreading across multiple sites. "From Maid to Millionaire's fiancé, Caleb Warren's mystery woman revealed." Below it was a photograph taken from the balcony the night before, Caleb adjusting the bracelet on her wrist as she looked up at him. The headline twisted the moment into something scandalous. Grace's voice barely came out. "Fiancé." Caleb's jaw tightened. It seems someone wanted a story more than the truth. He scrolled again, reading the comments, the speculation, the judgment. Her stomach turned. "Everyone will know I work for you. They will think I did," he interrupted, firm but calm. "I will handle it." But his phone kept buzzing, call after call. The foundation board, public relations, even his lawyer. The damage was spreading fast. Grace stood up, her pulse racing. "Maybe I should just explain. Tell them it was only a misunderstanding, that it was—" He shook his head sharply. "No. You will not say a word to anyone. Let me speak to my team first." She took a step back, feeling the world tilt under her feet. The night that had felt like salvation was now turning into something dangerous. A few minutes later, his assistant arrived, pale and nervous. "Mr. Warren, the board wants an immediate statement. They are asking if the engagement rumor is true." Caleb rubbed his temple, the pressure mounting behind his eyes. "Tell them I will address it soon." Grace looked at him helplessly. "If you deny it now, they will drag my name through every headline. If you do not deny it, they will say it is true." He looked at her, silent. Then his expression changed, steady, resolved. "Then we do not deny it." "Not yet." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" He stood straight, his voice calm but deliberate. "If I deny it, they will destroy your reputation. If I confirm it, at least we control the story." "They want a fairy tale?" "We will give them one. For now." Grace's breath caught. "You want me to pretend to be your fiancé?" He met her gaze, unwavering. "Only until the noise dies down. It is temporary, just like before." She wanted to argue, to say no, but the look in his eyes stopped her. It was not arrogance, it was protection. Outside the penthouse, reporters had already gathered. The flash of cameras burst against the glass windows. Grace could hear their voices shouting his name, asking questions she never imagined hearing in her life. Inside, Caleb placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Grace, I will make sure no one hurts you, but I need you to trust me again. Just one more time." She nodded slowly, her heart pounding. "One more time." He gave a faint smile, though it did not reach his eyes. "Then it is settled." Neither of them said the truth out loud, that this was no longer just a contract, and one more night of pretending would soon become a lifetime of consequences neither of them were ready for. By the next morning, the city was already buzzing with the story. Every news outlet had the same headline splashed across their screens: Caleb Warren's secret engagement, from Maid to Millionaire's bride. The photo from the balcony had gone viral, and the internet was spinning a fairy tale Grace never agreed to live in. She could not leave the penthouse without being followed. Reporters camped outside the lobby, shouting questions and snapping pictures through tinted car windows. Grace stayed near the window, watching the chaos below, her stomach twisting tighter with every headline that appeared on her phone. Caleb moved through the penthouse like a man at war, phone in hand, voice low and sharp as he dealt with his team. His publicist wanted him to deny everything. The board demanded a statement. Investors wanted reassurance that the company's reputation would not crumble over gossip. When he finally hung up, Grace spoke quietly. "This has gone too far. People think I trapped you." He turned to her, his jaw set. I told you I would handle it. But they are attacking you now, she said. You cannot keep protecting me. I am not protecting you, he replied, more sharply than he intended. Then his tone softened. I am protecting the truth. You do not deserve this. Before she could answer, the elevator doors opened. Victoria Lane stepped out impeccably dressed, confident and cold. She had been Caleb's chief operations officer for years, and the rumors once said she was much more. Well, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, I always knew you had a taste for surprises, Caleb. But this one? A maid pretending to be your fiancé? Even for you, that is bold. Grace froze. Caleb's expression hardened. This is not your concern, Victoria. Of course it is, she said smoothly. The board is panicking. Investors are calling me nonstop. They think you have lost control. And frankly, I agree. She turned to Grace with a smile that was anything but kind. Tell me, Grace, how much did you ask for? A lifetime salary? A penthouse of your own? What was the deal? Grace's face flushed. You have no right. Victoria held up a folder, cutting her off. Actually, I do, because I have been doing some research. Do you want to know what I found? She dropped the folder on the counter. Inside were photocopies of Grace's employment records, late rent notices, and her mother's hospital bills. A maid drowning in debt, a sick mother in need of surgery. It is almost poetic. You played your part perfectly. Grace's throat tightened. Those are private records. Victoria smirked. Nothing is private when it affects this company's image. She turned to Caleb. You need to end this now before she drags you down with her. Caleb's eyes darkened. Leave her out of this. Oh, I intend to, Victoria said coolly. I came to offer her a solution, a very generous one. She pulled out an envelope and slid it across the counter toward Grace. Take this money, enough to pay for your mother's surgery and start over somewhere far away. All you have to do is sign a statement saying you lied about everything. The media will move on. Everyone wins. Grace stared at the envelope. The weight of it seemed to pull the air from the room. For a brief moment, she thought of her mother, the hospital bills, the fear of losing her. But then she looked at Caleb standing there, silent, torn between damage control and decency. Her decision was clear. Grace pushed the envelope back across the counter. I will not sell my name or my dignity. Not for you, not for her, not for anyone. Victoria's smile faded. You are making a mistake. Grace straightened her shoulders. Maybe, but at least it will be mine. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the elevator. Caleb took a step after her. Grace, wait. She looked back, her voice steady but full of pain. I asked you for one night. I never asked for this. And if you will not tell the truth, I will not stay and live a lie. The elevator doors closed between them, leaving Caleb standing in silence as the city roared below. For the first time, the man who controlled everything felt powerless to stop the one person who had never wanted his power at all. The rain had returned by the time Grace reached her small apartment in Queens. She climbed the narrow stairway with shaking hands, her heart still pounding from the confrontation. Inside, the air smelled faintly of disinfectant and tea. Her mother looked up from the couch, a thin blanket around her shoulders. You are home early, Mrs. Miller said softly. You look pale. What happened? Grace set her purse down, forcing a smile that did not reach her eyes. It is nothing, Mom, just work drama. But her mother had already seen the headlines. The television was on low volume, showing Caleb's face beside hers, with the words, fake engagement scandal, flashing at the bottom of the screen. Mrs. Miller muted the sound. Grace, tell me the truth. Grace sat beside her, staring at the floor. It was supposed to be one night, just a favor. But someone took a photo, and now everyone thinks I am. Her voice cracked. They think I sold myself for money. Her mother reached for her hand. I know, my daughter. I know what kind of heart you have. But the world does not always care about the truth. Grace's eyes filled with tears. I walked away, Mom. I could not stay there and let them use me like a shield. Mrs. Miller nodded slowly, pride and worry tangled in her expression. Then hold your head high. You did the right thing. Meanwhile, across the city, Caleb sat in his office, surrounded by chaos. His assistant updated him with calls from investors, angry messages from the board, and the news that Victoria had officially proposed canceling the Heart Foundation project to limit exposure. He stared at the reports in silence. Grace's words echoed in his mind. If you will not tell the truth, I will not stay and live a lie. When the meeting with the board began, Victoria wasted no time. We cannot afford to let this scandal define us, she said sharply. The foundation project is too risky now. It makes you look sentimental, distracted, compromised. Caleb leaned forward, his voice low but firm. Do you know what makes us compromised, Victoria? Trading people's dignity for profit. She stiffened. This is not about dignity, it is business. He stood up, his patience gone. No. It is about the reason we started this company to help people, not humiliate them. Grace Miller reminded me of that, and I will not destroy the only good thing this organization has left, just because you are afraid of a headline. The room went silent. For the first time, the board saw the man behind the title, not the untouchable CEO, but someone who finally meant every word he said. Caleb turned to his assistant. Prepare a press conference. I will speak for myself. Later that afternoon, cameras filled the auditorium. Reporters whispered as Caleb took the podium, his face calm but determined. I owe the public the truth, he began. The woman in that photograph is Grace Miller. She did not trick me, and she did not ask for money. She asked for one night, one chance, to stand beside me at an event that was supposed to represent compassion. That is all. He paused, letting the words sink in. She came to me out of kindness, and I stayed silent while others mocked her. That was my mistake. From this day on, our foundation will continue its mission, and the first patient to receive full financial support will be Mrs. Miller, her mother. The room erupted with questions, flashes, and noise, but Caleb stepped away from the microphone, ignoring them all. Across town, Grace was sitting in the hospital waiting room with her mother when the news aired live. She watched the screen, her hand covering her mouth as Caleb spoke her name, not as a scandal, but as a person. Her mother smiled weakly, tears in her eyes. He told the truth, honey. Grace nodded slowly, her heart trembling. For the first time in days, she could breathe. Yes, Mom, he did. But deep inside, she knew this was not the end. The truth had set her free, but it had also tied their lives together in a way neither of them could undo. 2 months later, spring sunlight poured through the glass walls of the brand-new Warren Hart Center. White lilies lined the entrance, and a small crowd gathered for the dedication ceremony. Grace stood quietly near the back, her mother in a wheelchair beside her, both dressed simply but radiating quiet pride. Caleb stepped to the podium, no longer hiding behind corporate polish. His voice carried warmth, calm, and sure. This center was built on the belief that compassion is not weakness, it is strength. It began with one person who reminded me that a single act of kindness can change everything. He turned slightly, his eyes finding Grace in the crowd. That person is Grace Miller. Her courage to stand for what is right brought us here today. Applause filled the air. Grace felt her cheeks flush as her mother squeezed her hand, whispering, "You see, honey, the truth always wins." After the ceremony, Caleb approached them. He looked different, more open, less guarded. "Mrs. Miller," he said kindly, "how are you feeling?" She smiled. "Alive. Thanks to your foundation and my daughter's stubborn heart." Caleb turned to Grace, his eyes gentle. "You once said it would be just one night. But that night changed everything for me. I am done with contracts and pretending. I want something real." Grace looked at him, her heart racing. "Real is not always easy, Caleb." He smiled. "Neither is a heart surgery, but we survive both if we are lucky." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box, not flashy, not expected. Inside was a simple gold ring. No conditions, no secrets, just honesty. "Will you stay this time for life? Not for one night?" For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then Grace nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Yes, but only if we keep helping people like my mother." He laughed softly. "That is the best deal I have ever signed." As the crowd applauded, sunlight spilled across the framed display on the wall behind them, a small glass case holding a silver bracelet engraved with the word heart. Underneath it, a plaque read, "One night of kindness changed countless lives." And in that moment, they both knew the story that began as a lie had ended as something true, something lasting, and something worth every heartbeat.